Hello, and welcome to Cal TV. My name is Gemma, and I will be host for these next episodes. In fact, this time we are going to take a page out of the network's book, and we're going to put together a little mini-series, a three-part mini-series featuring Rich Sheridan. Rich is the CEO of Menlo Innovations. I have great admiration for Rich, multiple levels. His ability to be an inspirational speaker, his ability as an author, and maybe most importantly, his ability as a leader. So please join us in the first of our three-part mini-series featuring Rich Sheridan, CEO of Menlo Innovations and author of Joy Inc. In this first episode, we'll explore what the background was to bring Rich through this journey in his life and the beginning of what became Menlo Innovations. Thank you for tuning in. Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Cal TV, brought to you by Calvary Robotics. My name is Gemma. I'm the Global Vice President for Sales and Marketing for the group. I'm excited, delighted, maybe even a better term, to welcome our guest today. Our guest today, Rich Sheridan. Richard is his formal name, but he allows me to call him Rich. He's the CEO and my favorite title of all, Chief Storyteller, and the co-founder of Menlo Innovations, which, by the way, has won the Alfred P. Sloan Award for Business Excellence in Workplace Flexibility for multiple years, and also several revenue awards from Inc. magazine. I can attest to the fact that he's a sought-after speaker at conferences and business meetings around the world. His talks are inspirational. We're thrilled to pick his brain a bit today on this episode of Cal TV. Rich, welcome. And maybe tell our listeners a little bit more about you personally. You can start with your grandchildren if you like.
Oh, we could spend the whole hour on that. Great to be with you, Joe. Thanks for inviting me in. I'm excited about our conversation. And yes, 4 granddaughters down in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the oldest of which went to the first day of first grade today. So big day for her.
Yeah, I have 7 grandchildren, 8th one on the way. It's an exciting time in our lives to certainly spend time with the little ones as part of our family. So, Rich, while you have made me a disciple after reading your book, Joy Inc., I'm guessing many of our listeners may not have yet. And then for those who have, we do have some questions or points of discussion I'm sure will interest them too. There's so many concepts that I'd like to investigate with you today. I'm not sure we'll even have enough time to touch them all. But before we discuss the impact or the effect the pandemic, which has affected a lot of companies and people for sure, what that may or may have had on your group, let's explore how it all became a reality in the first place. So as I said, so many things we'd like to discuss, particularly how you and your partners developed what became Menlo Innovations. Could you give our listeners a little background on why and how Menlo even got started?
Absolutely. And good news, Joe, we celebrated our 20th birthday in June of this year.
Happy anniversary.
And yes, thank you. And, 20 always feels big. This particular 20 felt incredibly big given what we've all been through the last 18 months. And so I'm glad to still be with you today in so many different ways. So we started in 2001 with a crazy mission. We wanted to end human suffering in the world as it relates to technology. And we were going to do that by bringing joy back to what we believed was one of the most unique endeavors mankind has ever undertaken, the invention of software. And there was big trouble in our industry, and we were going to tackle it head on. Anybody who's had any experience with software teams, and virtually everybody has by now, there's barely a business that can run without their software. That software is often big trouble. If it's projects, it's missed deadlines, blown budgets, unhappy users, unhappy customers, quality problems galore. If it's products that are out there, they're delivered late. They don't do what anybody wants them to do. And once they get installed, everybody needs scads of training to use these complicated interfaces. And we just saw way too much suffering in our industry. And we said, you know what, there's got to be a better way. And that is the whole mantra of Menlo, is coming up with a very different way. And I know we'll dive into some of those differences. But let me just give you a couple of high-level pictures of weird things we do here that people find fascinating enough that we get between 3,000 and 4,000 tour guests every year from all over the world who just come to see how we do what we do because it's so different. And so you can see over my shoulder here just a little bit, this big open collaborative space. Now, an open office, not that unusual. Obviously, we'll talk about the effects of that in the pandemic times, but let's just focus on the first 19 years of Menlo for a while. But what's weird in the room is everybody here works to a computer. Everyone works in pairs. 2 people, 1 keyboard and mouse, sharing a single task at the same time. The pairs are assigned and we switch them at least every 5 working days. So the collaboration is through the roof here. A lot of people wonder, what benefit do we get from supposedly cutting productivity in half, for some ethereal benefit. So we can talk about that. And then the other part was a thing we had to design from scratch because it just didn't exist in our industry, is something that people would popularly today call design thinking, but it goes beyond that for us. We have this team of people we call high-tech anthropologists, and their job, like the lean community would say, is go to the Gemma, get out into the world, study people as an anthropologist would in their native environment, learn their goals, their habits, their vocabulary, their workflows, bring that back to our room here, design what we believe are better user experiences based on what we discovered out in the world. So a lot of people think design is about design genius. We believe that genius actually exists in the minds of the people we serve. Our job is to extract that genius from them and build that genius into the software. Because remember, Joe, we're an industry where we've learned to call the people we serve stupid users. We write dummies books for those poor people. And then we get the users to self-efface and say, oh, you know me, I'm just a stupid user. I'm like, awesome, we've got you right where we want you, right? It's like, what other industry could get away with systematically over its entire course of history, call the people they serve stupid? And we just said, no, it doesn't have to be that way. We believe it is possible to delight the end user, and we have systematically created a company, a process, and a culture to consistently produce those results over 20 years. And I'm here to tell you, this is a mind-blowing result, Joe, for me. In my early days in the software career, in software industry, when I was in what I call my trough of disillusionment years, I was firefighting every day. There were emergencies, 1 to 2 emergencies per day in every project I ever worked on. We have had at Menlo in 20 years, 2 software emergencies in 20 years. I can't even believe I can say that. This system we've created produces results far beyond what I would have ever expected.
Well, there's some parallels. I still have firefights, by the way, so trying to work through that. But in our business, actually, part of what we do is the same kind of thing as you call those the tech archaeologists there, the actual
high-tech anthropologists. Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yep.
Anthropologists,
okay.
Thanks. Our team actually will go out and take a look at what the people doing, not only because of what the process, but as you say, the little nuances of things you can't get from a drawing. We know what the part looks like, but when they're just doing this little thing in the process that doesn't get translated into a drawing or a communication, and then when you try to go install it because you didn't know that and it doesn't work, what did we miss? And so we do this very similar that way. Not quite as good, maybe not even as tactful as you do, but there is some parallels there.
Well, the little things are the big things, as you well know.
Exactly. Those little things can be the big pains. Yeah. So in your book, and I'm going to reference quite a bit through the discussion. I think it should be a Bible for many. So thanks again for sharing that. there was a thing we called the Java factory early on in trying to do some experimenting, as you call it, and I found that very intriguing also. And a lot of lessons I'm sure came out of that. Maybe you want to share a little bit. Well, what was the most impactful lesson from that Java factory for you, and what you took from that going forward?
Yeah, and the Java factory you're referring to, Joe, was in my previous life before Menlo. I got 2 years to run a big experiment inside of a tired old public company. And what we learned there became the prototype for what would become Menlo Innovations. And I would say the biggest thing I learned at that point is look for the energy from the edges. And here's what I mean by that. When I first went to my team and suggested I was going to pull them out of their offices and cubes, put them out in a big open room, have them share a computer with another human being, and have them share their code with another human being, because programmers are very sort of territorial, right? And I looked at my team and said, guys, what do you think? I think this could help us solve some big problems we have here. They wouldn't even make eye contact with me. They all looked down at the floor, right? Finally, one of the guys raises his hand. He says, Rich, blood, mayhem, murder. Don't do it. Don't pull me out of my office. Don't put me out in a big open room. Don't make me share a computer. Please, for God's sakes, don't make me share my code. It's my code, right? And so that was the first reaction. So I got strong resistance. I was walking into not just a headwind, a hurricane of emotion in the other direction. But I had 2 guys that wanted to try it. They came up to me after the meeting and said, hey, we're intrigued. So we ran an experiment just with them. Claire and Bob were their names. Claire, one of my longtime programmers, came to me a few months before and he said, Rich, I think I'm going to quit. I can't stand it. I'm in the same trough of disillusionment you are. I was up at VP. He was a frontline senior programmer, but we were both frustrated as could be, and he wanted me to be a reference on his resume. So here's this guy who's already told me he's leaving, and he's volunteering to run this experiment, which I thought was intriguing. That he was sort of like, I kind of got this feeling like, one last shot, Rich. He caught me in the parking lot 3 weeks into this pairing experiment with Bob. On the way into the office, he's like, hey, Rich, can we talk for a second? I said, what's up? He says, are you still going to pay me to work here? I said, what? He goes, let me tell you, this thing we're doing, this experiment, is so much fun. I'm getting so much done. It doesn't feel like work anymore. I feel like I should work for you for free.
You give me goosebumps.
So here's the big learning from this moment. Blood, mayhem, murder, I will work for you for free. These were the edges, right? This was as far apart as you could get. You don't move towards change by working with the middle. You move towards change by working with the edges. Because if you can get the edges to go with you, the rest will follow. And that was my first big lesson out of the Java factory interfaces.
And that certainly sounds like it was pretty impactful. So thanks for sharing that. That's a great story. You said it gave me goosebumps. I can imagine that conversation in the parking lot. You were probably floating after that discussion.
I couldn't believe it. Yeah. I mean, here's a guy who's going to quit. And now he's telling me I'll work for you for free. Like, okay, I'm onto something here. Something big is happening.
Exactly. So again, in discussing some of the things, one of the chapters you discuss the concept of building trust as a foundation. Certainly, I believe trust is central to really the way we need to work. But what did you do, both physically and philosophically, to build trust? Because it's not an easy thing to just say we need trust. It takes work. So maybe explore that a little bit for us.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be cool if we just like snap our fingers, say, Joe, you and I trust each other. Let's go forward, right? And I have kind of a formula in my head for where trust fits into teamwork, because there are very few things any of us can accomplish in life anymore, especially in the business world, with singular heroes, right? We need teams of human beings to work together. And if we're going to have teamwork, we darn well better have relationships. And if we're going to have relationships, we darn well better have trust. And the only way I know how to build trust with human beings is to spend time together. I think it's the only way it works. I don't know how you could build trust through email. I don't know how you could best build trust through Slack messages. I don't know how you could build trust through meetings even, right? But actually working shoulder to shoulder together. So for the past 22 years in my life, in the 20 years at Menlo now, I've been out in the room with everybody else. No wall, no office, no cube, no door. Out in the room, same 5-foot table as everybody else behind me here. I won't say that automatically builds trust, but how many managers have ever told their people, "Oh, I have an open door policy"? I've never had an open door policy, Joe. I don't have a door.
Right. Well, you're certainly creating the environment for, as you say, it doesn't automatically give you trust, but creates the environment for it. And it's interesting you draw that parallel. And as you're talking through it, I'm thinking, well, of course, the military has thought that for a long time. The soldiers work side by side, they period, et cetera. But even you think about some of the in our lifetimes, the Tiger Woods, the Serena Williams, they're singular maybe on the court, but they rely and trust very heavily in their team member, their coach or whatever, to be part of their success. That's why and they'll give them the pat on the back as being that team member, that success. So it's a pairing strategy even there. And we think of that as sole effect, but it's not. They're not solo. They are, in fact, a peer in building their success. So.
And almost every golfer you ever see win a tournament.
Same thing, exactly.
They use we, not I. And most of the time in that moment, what they're talking about is their caddy. And you watch the relationship between golfer and caddy, and you realize that is an important paired relationship between those two.
Yeah, and I you would know this, but our company had a little fun tournament with one of our suppliers a couple of weeks ago, and one of my team members here was my partner, and that we played, and he would almost every putt say, "Hey, come and take a look at this. What do you think?" And yet he's a much better golfer than I am by far. Yet he was, as you say, looking at the extra set of eyes that minimize the opportunity for mistake and appreciate the opportunity for success. So even in that case, we can help each other. Even in while I'm not the expert he is, I have some experience that he can benefit from. Anyway, so the touring, the whole idea actually, pairing. It's central to the work environment you talked about, but it seems difficult to grasp for any organization, and maybe even more so for a company that produces software. As you said, you early on, they're like, "Don't take my software." How did you test that? Was the Java the test, or was it really at Menlo where you really expanded on that and testing that in the first place?
It was back at Interface Systems because we had those two guys that tried it out, and now the question became, how do we get the rest of the team to run this experiment, especially since there was resistance or at least complacency, like, I don't want to do that, right? And so I will simply say we tricked them. And you have to understand people in order to do something like this. And I understood programmers because that's where I had been for about 20 years of my career. I was writing code. And so we dangled a little shiny object in front of the programmers saying we were going to bring in some experts on a new programming language back then in 1999 called Java. So I called it the Java Factory. We said, "Hey guys, those blood, mayhem, murder things we talked about?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we don't want to do any of those." We said, "Hey, we're going to use them for a week to learn Java. We're going to pair you. We're going to pair you with these experts. We're going to switch the pairs every day so you can learn Java." And all they heard was, "Learn Java." Right? Shiny object. Oh, I want to learn Java.
The ring.
And so we pulled them out of their offices and cubes. We put them out in this big open, literally a factory space, Joe. We'd taken over an old factory that had been mothballed, put them out at tables, put them two to a computer, had them doing real work on a real project with these experts in the mix, switching the pairs every day so they could all learn from one another, just like you and your golf partner were doing. And I will tell you, Joe, it was like watching Cold Fusion for the first time. It was like, oh my gosh, the human energy, the amount of stuff they got done, the interactions they were having for maybe the first time ever. So at the end of the week, I brought them together and I said, "Guys, how'd the week go?" Oh, Joe, they were like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe how much fun this was. I can't believe how much we got done. I can't believe how much we learned. I can't believe, how easy it was to learn something new that I've never done before. This was amazing week. And unfortunately for them, they didn't realize I had just set the hook and set it deep, and I yanked the line. And I said, awesome. This is the way we're going to work from now on.
But you made believers out of them.
No, not yet. Not yet.
Oh, no?
Believe me, because I saw this look of terror in their face. They're like, oh, crap.
Oh, really?
We fell for it, right? And they're like, no. And I said, guys, what did you just tell me? Never got more done, never learned more, never had more fun doing the work, got so much done. And they were like, and now they're conflicted, right? Now they're like, now they are arguing with themselves, right? And so then the weeks that followed became the most difficult weeks in the journey, because what happened was they still had their cubes and offices, and they kept going there first. And about 9:30 in the morning, I'd say, hey, guys, come on, it's time to go out back to the factory, which was just through a metal door and a concrete wall, just a few feet from where they were. And they're like, okay, I'll be there in a minute. I got another email. I got to finish up this thing here. And James, my co-founder now, but my consultant then, we started brainstorming on how could we get them to go there first? How could we get them to start their day in the factory? And I will tell you, we've learned some lessons even during the pandemic on this. The best way to do this as a leader is let them make the choice. And so here's what we did. We gave them incentive. We said, guys, your choice, whether you work out here or you work there. But here's the difference. All the new products we're going to build in the new technology are going to be built in the new way, in the new space. If you want, we have lots of old products that need maintenance and enhancements. And if you want to work that way, I got plenty of work for you to do. You can work out in your Cuban office. Well, guess what, John? New products, new technology, new way of working. Okay. And over about the next 6 months, we changed the paths in the carpet. And after a while, my team members, one by one, started coming to me and saying, you know what? I don't use my office anymore. You can give it away. And a new day had dawned at that point. We had cemented in a new way of working, a new pattern of thinking, a new pattern of process and everything. And quite frankly, Joe, that was about April of 2000 or so, and never looked back since. For me, it's been different. For everybody who's worked for me, it's been different. It was just a cementing a new way of working.
It actually touched on another point you talk about in the book, a couple of different areas, and I'll put in quotes, freedom to learn. You discuss the idea of freedom to learn, and I think we can all benefit from understanding the benefits of this, and particularly kind of the opposite. And you also touch on this point in the book a few times: artificial fear. It's a detriment to learning. Maybe for our listeners, because I like the way you express it, could you expand a little bit on this idea for our listeners?
Well, I think fear is probably the most insidious force in management today. And I will tell you, I was brought up in that environment. I learned to lead with fear because I had really good teachers. And what I'm talking about, there are many things we humans should be afraid of, right? And especially these days. But I'm talking about the kind of fear that we managers and leaders craft artificially, hoping to induce some kind of productivity, some kind of response, right? And my old boss, one of my old bosses, used to tell me, he said, hey, Rich, now that you're leading, he says, let me give you a few pointers. Number one, management by walking around. Now, the way he did it, though, this is a Tom Peters thing, management by walking around, which I believe in. Absolutely. And I love Tom Peters. But my boss took it to the next level. I called it management by walking around and annoying people. Usually about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday, he'd walk into my cube and say, hey, Rich, how's it going? Well, it's going okay until you got here. What you working on? Well, that thing we talked about on Monday, I'm still working. How's that going? Well, it's going a little slower than I thought. Oh, are you coming in this weekend? That wasn't really a question, was it, boss? And so, you realize, by the time he left, my blood pressure was through the roof. I'm in reptile brain mode now. I'm pissed. I'm like, and at that point, I'm like, why are you doing this? Well, then guess what? I became a leader, and I learned to manage that way. Hey, how's it going, Joe? What you working on? You're almost done? You coming in this weekend? And he used to tell me, Rich, if you see two people in a corridor talking to one another, just walk up to them and stand there, and they'll get back to work. Like as if they're not talking about anything productive anyways, right? Now, this is hilarious, Joe, because I have institutionalized two people talking to each other for the last 22 years, right? And so, again, this idea that we think fear can motivate does exactly the opposite. Because here, you touched on it briefly about AI and machine learning and big data and all the forces at work in the world that are literally threatening, supposedly our jobs. Well, I'll tell you, there are 4 things that we humans are really, really good at. We will never be able to get computers to be as good as us. And it's simply this: creativity, imagination, invention, and innovation. Those are uniquely human. Those are the things every company on the planet needs right now. And guess what? They come out of the part of our brain that shuts down when we are afraid. So literally, if we motivate people with fear, we're robbing ourselves of the most human part of our brain, of every one of our team members, and we've lost the greatest value those humans have that we're paying for every single day.
If my listeners don't take anything else away from this conversation, I hope they grasp that. That's a wonderful concept and absolutely true. Thanks for sharing that. It's fabulous. Again, I want to thank you for tuning in to Cal TV and episode 1 of this mini-series with Rich Sheridan. I know you found that entertaining and enjoyable and probably learned quite a bit. So please stay tuned now for the second part of our mini-series coming up shortly. And I know you'll enjoy exploring what became Menlo Innovation and talking about the evolution of what it was like to work in that organization. Thank you again, and we thank Rich for being such a wonderful part of Cal TV, again sponsored by Calvary Robotics, and my name is Joe Gemma. Thank you.